Welcome to our small but select history presentation. This is a reasonably good sized crowd by our standards. You have the advantage, because we are a bit of a smaller major, that means that we get a smaller venue. So you don't have to wander off to the more Ulu LTs that have a lot more space but also a lot more students. I'm guessing that if you are here, you are probably already thinking seriously about a history major, and which is great. But even if you aren't, if you've maybe kind of wandered in, then we'll be glad to tell you why we think you should major in history. I'm Prof. Lockhart, and I'm just finishing my 15th year of teaching here. I teach mostly Southeast Asian history, but I also teach the history of Christianity as well. And I'll be giving you an overview, a little bit about our department, but more about why you might want to think about majoring in history. And then we will have a presentation. This is the first year that we're doing this. We'll have a presentation from our History Society as well. Every major in the faculty has its own student society. So you have History Society, Sociological Society, and so you will get a chance to hear what things look like from a student perspective as well. So why this title, The History Why Bother? When they began setting up this open house a couple of years ago, they encouraged people to sort of pick topics out of their fields and to find something clever or sexy in terms of a title. And I could never really think of a very sexy topic to talk about in history. So since much of the time at open houses, whether it's NUS open house or faculty open house, I have to sort of justify the question of what you can do with a history major or why you want to major with history. So this is why I chose the topic of history, why bother. Because, again, now if you all are here, I might be kind of speaking to the converted already, because your chances are that many of you have already done it. How many of you have done A-level history? Most, but not all. Okay, if you did A-level history, there's a very strong chance that we trained your teachers. If they are less than about 10 years or so, 10 years or less out of NUS, then they would be, I would probably have taught them, and as well as some of my colleagues. So what I'm going to talk about a bit is why you might want to think about coming here to do history. Now, FHS, okay, you're used to FAQ. These are FHS, frequently heard stereotypes, okay? Now, if you have chosen history as a subject in A-level, you may have already heard these questions from your friends who think that you are crazy to be studying history. If people laugh at you for your choice of subject in JC, don't feel bad. When I was in secondary school in the States, my favorite topic was actually languages. And as you know, Americans are generally not particularly good at languages, and so if you are especially a secondary school student and you study languages, people think you are really weird. So if you are used to having people think you're a bit weird because you like history, don't worry, you're in good company here. But we think we have a great department, we think we have a great major, and I'm going to share a bit with you about what you can do in our department and what you can do with a history major. But let's start with the stereotypes. Now, the stereotypes, of course, are based particularly on those who maybe had history in lower secondary. They did their required 1 or 2 years of Singapore history, and they have vowed that they are never going to do history again. Or maybe a few people actually made it into A-level history and maybe did not have one of our former students and therefore did not have a great time studying history at A-level. So people have a lot of different stereotypes. What are the stereotypes? Okay, this is the first one. Okay, generally speaking, the assumption that history is going to be boring. Okay, now I would maintain that almost any subject at O-level and A-level is potentially boring, no matter how interesting it really might be outside. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, the second one, right, essentially, and this is a very common one, that history is largely memorization of facts and dates. Many people, when we're teaching freshman history and we ask our students, what does history mean to you? Very often this is the common response that they're going to give us. Now, the third one, of course, is that history is not practical, okay? It's not a practical subject. This is particularly common as a parental argument. I've been telling this story that earlier this year I was talking to a year 2 student, and he said, I'd like to major in history, but my mom really wants me to major in something practical, literature. I said, okay, let me talk to your mom. And I actually did persuade him into a history major. But one of the most important assumptions that people tend to have is that you will not get a real job in the real world, that history is not practical, that you learn about medieval knights and jousting and things like that, but you have no real world skills. This is another of the common stereotypes. And of course, if you have taken history, particularly at let's say lower secondary, where it is all essentially NE and Singaporean history, then you're going to tend to assume that history is propaganda. And the most common one, okay, is that essentially if you major in history, that you are bound, you are on the through train to become a teacher. When I'm doing either the open house, the NUS open house, or the faculty open house, the number one question I get is, what can I do with a history major if I don't want to teach? If someone comes up to me and says, what? After the first word, I can answer the question already. I know what they're going to ask. So I want to reassure you, and I will come back to this later on, that although in a given year, maybe one-third of our majors become teachers. But it is certainly not a requirement that you have to teach with a history major, and it is not the only option that you will have. So let's debunk a few of the myths. This is what we love to do in history, is to take the sort of common myths and common stereotypes about history, including Singapore history, and try to undermine them. Now, we have a lot of different kinds of history. The history that we teach here is not your grandmother's history, okay? Assuming that your grandmother studied history. So we have things like sport in history, film in history, we have popular culture, history of technology, history of medicine, a number of history of religion. If you're interested in religion, your own or other people's, there's actually religious studies minor in the arts faculty. You can major in history and take a minor in religious studies, and then take modules on religion in different departments. And a number of the modules, I won't say a number of the best modules, even though that I think they might be, but a number of the modules for the religious studies minor are taught in our department. We have, if you are interested in history and you're interested in religion, we have a number of things that combine that. And for example, Europe of the dictators. We have a very wide variety of history modules, history subjects that are very different from what you would have taken in earlier years. And definitely, we cannot guarantee you that you will have no facts and no dates to memorize, okay? It's virtually impossible to teach a history that is fact-free and date-free. But it certainly is not the main thing that you're going to be doing. And when you get to a history exam, it is not going to look like your O-level or A-level history. So we have things like memory, heritage, and history. How do people remember things? Especially museums, for example. How do museums tell stories about history? This is one of our most, really one of our most xiong modules, but it's also one of our best. And several students every year will do honors theses related to issues of memory and heritage and history. Things like minorities, ethnic minorities in Southeast Asian history, which I teach. We have history of gender, gendered history, essentially looking at history through a gendered lens. History of Buddhism, again along with Christianity, Islam. Environmental history, history of strategic thought. If you're interested in the military, okay, we have one of our best lecturers, Prof. Brian Farrell, is a military history lecturer. And so we have a pretty good curriculum of military history in the department. One of the things I should maybe point out, I didn't put in a slide, is that once you get into the history major, you can basically study anything you want. We have a whole slew of modules covering various aspects of history. You can do anything you want. Some departments will have sort of compulsory modules. You may have to choose a particular track, a particular area within the module, within the major. We are very chill, okay? You basically have to pass the exposure module to get into the major. Other than that, until you get to honors year, it's pretty much up to you what you want to take. So if you want to take, let's say, all Asian history, you can do that because we have a very strong Asian history component. A number of us, more than half the department, focuses on Asia. Some students come in and basically want to siam Southeast Asia for their entire time. Take no more Southeast Asian history because they already had it at O-level and A-level. It's a little bit difficult to completely avoid Southeast Asia because we have so many, but it's still possible. We also have European history and American history, military history. We have a good variety of different kinds of history. So that, and when you come in, you can choose what you want. You can put together what you want. Also, because of the size of our department and the number of majors, generally speaking, our students don't have to fight and bid huge numbers of points in the bidding system to get into the modules they want. You may know that module selection in US is based on a bidding system called cores. You're given a certain number of points and you have to bid it. If you're in one of the very large departments like Econs, for example, Econs has 1/4 of all of the majors in the arts faculty. And the bigger, like Psych and CNM, those students do not have an easy time getting the modules they want because they're bidding against a lot of other majors. Generally speaking, if you are a history major, you can get the modules you want in the semester you want, and you don't have to bid huge amounts of points. And in some cases, you may not have to bid anything. So my point is twofold, that we have flexibility in terms of the major. We have a lot of different kinds of modules available, and generally speaking, you can get what you want. Now, the issue of relevance, okay, again, a lot of people assume that when you are majoring in history, you are only studying the past. But the fact is, I think virtually every single module that we teach in the history department relates past to the present. This is a map of which I've been using for a number of years because the kind of flash points or conflict points in the region stay the same. All of those red circles are areas where there's been some kind of conflict in the past 10 years or so. Every conflict point has its history. Virtually no wars or struggles or other kinds of conflicts just start out of nothing. And one of the main things that we teach students with a history major is using the past to explain the present. Okay? The past is not irrelevant. The past really does help to know what's going on now. And maybe while I mention that, a frequently asked question that I get is, what is the difference between history and political science as a major? Many of you may have interests in both. Many students will end up majoring in both or majoring in one, minoring in the other. Political science and history look at some of the same issues, but they explain them in different ways. The history tends to use much more of the past in order, and especially cultural explanations, historical explanations, to understand what's going on. Political scientists use more present explanations, more concepts and models and theories to explain what's going on. And they tend to rely less on history and less on the past than we do. But if you are wavering between political science, between PS and history, this is one very fundamental difference in our approach. But in other words, history teaches things that are relevant. And when you are studying the past, you are learning the past in order to explain the present. This will also be important when you get out into the job market. You're not going to come out with your brain kind of fixed 500 years in the past and therefore have no understanding of what's going on now. This is not the way that we structure the major. Virtually all of our modules, link past and present. So we look at the long-term consequences of things that happened in the past. We look at the issues of memory and representation. How do people remember things? How do governments, museums, how do they tell the stories? And what are the misuses and abuses, the ways that history can be used in negative ways? So you look at Pedra Branca, for example, right? Some people outside the region might ask, well, why did two neighboring countries, two friendly ASEAN countries, have to go to World Court to settle a dispute over an island a small island and a lighthouse and a bunch of rocks. Okay? And the answer is essentially because of history. I should point out also that one of our history colleagues got a government award because he secretly helped out the Singapore government by providing information for the Pedro Branca case. But that's just one example of something that if you are looking at current events, if you're looking at contemporary issues, they have roots in the past. And what we try to do is to help you to understand the past in order to make sense of what's going on in the world now. Now, also for propaganda, okay? Now, this is a few years old already, but I suspect many of you have seen Ho Sang-yong's song at some point about living in Singapore, which is really quite a cool song. We cannot claim him as one of our alumni, but I think we can claim his philosophy. When you come and study Singaporean history here, you are not going to get just standard propaganda. Okay, our Singapore history is not taught by people from MOE. It is not using MOE textbooks. Okay, and it is a very different perspective from what you would be getting in school. And when you are in NUS, everybody has to take one Singapore Studies module. And a number of students from outside the history department come and take our Singapore Studies modules because they're good modules. They're different from what they've learned. So we have our nation building in Singapore. Mr. Edgar Liao, who is one of our cameramen back there, is the man to see for that module. He's our former graduate and is now running that module. We have another one called The Evolution of a Global City-State, which is going further back in time. We have an Approaches to Singapore History, and we have a Sources of Singapore History. So we have a number of different Singapore-related modules that are definitely not the same kind of history that you would have done at O-level or A-level. So you can spend a lot of time here, for example, looking at thinking about Singapore before Raffles, looking at what we might call grassroots history, social history, cultural history, looking at monuments, memorials, museums in Singapore, and essentially deconstructing, taking apart the Singapore story. Again, historians love to debunk and deconstruct. We like to take a government narrative, the way the government tells a story, and essentially tear it apart. Now, thinking about the future. The number one question, of course, especially for the parents here, but also I think for the students as well, how is history useful for a career? One of the things that we want to emphasize is that when you come to FASS, if you major in history, you are not just getting a history degree, you are getting a FASS degree. And a degree from this faculty gives you a very concrete set of skills. And therefore, when you go out on the job market, in many ways, the particular major you have is less important than the fact that you come from this faculty. So if you come from the arts faculty as opposed to from the biz ed faculty, if you come from biz ed, you will have a certain set of skills, okay? If you come from arts, you will have a certain set of skills. And these skills transcend all of the different majors, so that you will still have a set of skills that is common to almost all of the majors in the faculty, along with the specific knowledge that you have gotten from your own major. For one of the useful things in going out into the job market is that if you are a history major, you are going to have quite a bit of knowledge about several other countries. You cannot come out of a history major and only know about your own country. It is impossible to spend 4 years studying nothing but Singapore. So if you have, let's say, you've come out of a psych major and you've spent 4 years studying the brain, that's also useful, but it's useful in a different way. One of the reasons that history majors come out and get good jobs is that they are familiar usually with several different countries in the region or elsewhere in the world, especially if you've gone on exchange, which many of our students do, and have spent time overseas. You also come out with good research and analytical skills, so that we have former students working in almost every single government ministry. And for example, one of our graduates a number of years ago, he went to work for MOM, for Manpower. And he was working on issues of labor, particularly, I think, foreign labor in Singapore. Now, you might say that that's not a historical topic, and you're right. But the point is that he's used to doing research. He's used to looking at different groups of people, and looking at their problems, at looking at their issues, and so he could take the skills that he had acquired as a history student and apply them in a different context. And when you come out of FASS with a history degree, you have a tremendous number of skills in terms of doing research, in terms of doing analysis, and in terms of critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of our buzzwords now. You'll hear this probably again and again in the presentations that our faculty makes. But this is very important because we teach you to read texts and to ask questions about them, to write critically, to be able to analyze more than one side of an issue. And these are skills that employers in both the government sector and the private sector are going to want when you get out of university. Now, the big question is, okay, who would want me? Okay, who is going to take you with a history degree? One of the most fundamental points, and I've just made it sort of indirectly, I want to make it directly. A history major does not necessarily mean that you will get a so-called history job. The number of jobs in the civil service or in the private sector that might be directly considered history jobs is relatively small. But the point is, again, you're using the skills. You're using the skills and the knowledge, you are applying those, you are building on them when you go out into the working world. So that I would say outside of the teachers, a relatively small number of our alumni are doing history-related jobs. But they're doing jobs that build on the skills and the knowledge that they got. The idea of an arts and social science degree is that you have 4 years of studying a major that in most cases you enjoy. Okay? There are some students, I'm not going to mention names of any other departments, but there are some students that are stuck in practical, more so-called practical majors, but they don't particularly like them. There are students that are stuck in more practical faculties that don't like them. Every year we get a couple of students, let's say from science faculty, engineering faculty. They're there because their parents wanted them to go there because they could get a practical education, but they hate it. And they come and they take a history major, history module or a lit module, and they discover that they really want to be in this faculty and they want to transfer in. So the point I want to make is you don't, first of all, you don't want to be stuck in 3 or 4 years studying some really SYN major just because you think that it's more practical and it's not interesting. This is 3 or 4 years of your life. You do not want to waste 3 or 4 years of your life vomiting blood because you are studying a boring major. And whatever history may be, if you are interested in history, I can guarantee you that it is not a boring major. So our major prepares you for many kinds of jobs that are not necessarily history jobs. Now, the first choice, the employer, of course, that takes the largest number of graduates is MOE. But as I emphasized earlier, this is not automatic, okay? And in a given year, in a given honors cohort, I would say roughly 1/3. 1/3 of our graduates will go into teaching, okay? If you don't want to be in that 1/3, you don't have to be. Now, can anybody like to take a guess what the second largest employer of history graduates is after MOE? ISD. Yes. There are a huge number of history graduates at ISD. I've taught pretty much all of them. I have absolutely no idea what they do because they can't tell me. Okay? They don't even have cards. Okay? And sometimes they won't even say the name of the place. You know, yeah, in my office, my company. Okay? I mean, if I ask, it's the kind of thing if I ask too hard, they'll probably have to kill me after they tell me, so I'd rather not ask them. But ISD and MINDEF every year recruit our best. Last year, of our 2 top students, the 2 top firsts, 1 went to ISD and 1 went to MINDEF. And these places take history students. They come looking for history students because they know that history students have good skills. And generally speaking, if you have a second upper or better honors degree, you can get just about any government job that you want. What most civil service positions are looking for is not so much your major. They're looking at your overall results and the faculty that you came from. And so, and even if you end up with a second lower, often also can, okay? So the point is that when you come out with an honors degree in history, you can do a lot of different things. These are probably the big four employers of our alumni. National Heritage Board, there's no surprise, right? I mean, some students do go and work for museums or work in the archives. I would say, generally speaking, National Heritage Board, NHB, and MOE, these would be the most directly so-called history-related jobs. But if you have a good degree and you have done well, or even if you haven't done quite so well, if you've gotten up to honors and made it through with an honors degree, you have a lot of options as a history graduate. And in the private sector as well. History graduates do go into the private sector. We have students former students in journalism working for different publications. We've sent a couple into the corporate world, like Singtel, places like that. So we have a good variety. And this is one of the main points I want to make, that history department we produce good graduates ready for a very wide variety of jobs. Now, we are covering a number, if you just to mention briefly what a number of us are doing in research. We do a very wide variety of cultural history, sometimes scientific history, environmental history, social, political history, a broad range. And so, to some extent, the things that we teach also reflect this background. But we are, I think, generally speaking, we are considered one of the strongest teaching departments in the faculty. Over the years, quite a number of us have won teaching awards, and I think most students would generally agree that we are strong on teaching and generally considered reasonably friendly department as well. So I hope if you have already been thinking about history as a major, I would strongly recommend it to you. And if you have not been, I hope that maybe I have changed your mind a bit. Okay, I'm now going to turn it over to Ling, who is from our History Society. As I mentioned at the very beginning, every major has its own student society. This year we are adding a component into the presentation so you can hear about things from a student's perspective as well.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Lockhart. Hello everyone, my name is Ling, and today I would like to share more about the History Society. So as Prof. Lockhart has mentioned at the beginning of his presentation gives the professor's view on what doing history is like in NUS history. So I am here today to give a student's perspective on how being a history student is like. So just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Ling, and I am a second-year history student. So 2 years ago, I was like any one of you sitting here, also attending the lecture by Prof. Lockhart. And I was thinking, this department is quite cool. Why? Because we have professors who, Caucasian professors who speak Singlish. I was really, really amazed by that. After that, I decided to come in and take out a history exposure module and subsequently become a history student. I am in my second year, and my area of interest is actually in East Asia history. So I'm looking at countries like China, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And I am particularly interested in the international history of these few countries. So not just about the interaction among them, but also how these countries interact with the rest of the world. So interaction with Europe or other parts of Asia or America. I am a member of History Society. So actually by default, all history majors are member of History Society. And currently, I am doing an internship at the NUS Museum. So I am attached to the Li Kongqian Chinese collection, but I am also working on this exhibition that is focusing on Malayan art history in Singapore in the 1950s and the 1960s. So what I am doing now currently as an intern is that I am looking for exhibition reviews on newspapers. I want to know how people in the 50s and 60s view the exhibitions that were held in Singapore. And I'm also looking at photographs that show the layout of the exhibition. Because for our exhibition, I would like the visitors to know more about the paintings and drawings that time. We will also hope then that when they walk into the gallery, they can feel the environment just as what it was like in the 50s and 60s. So that's about me, what I am doing now, and what I have been doing in the department. Yep, so I will run through some of the activities that History Society has, and I will go according to chronological order. So that's at the beginning of the semester, where we have a Chinese New Year gathering. So we gather for food and of course lo hei, as all of us do in Chinese New Year, to wish everyone all the best in this new semester and the new year. So in the middle of the semester, when people are starting to get slightly busier over their work, we organize the career sharing, which will invite our alumni to come down to share with what they are doing at their respective career. So basically, our career talk is to tackle this basic question that kind of has been problematic or kind of has been the concern for a lot of our students. So what you can do, what are you going to do with a degree in history? So through this sharing session, we hope that our students can be exposed to different opportunities and they know that they actually can take out different job opportunity when they graduate. And towards the end of the semester, where everyone gets really busy and kind of very stressful over exams and revision, that's where we have our welfare week, where we give out welfare packs to our majors and to wish them all the best for their exams and their revisions. Ending the semester, we also publish our very own History Society's magazine. I have a few copies here, so I will pass out later. Magazine is our very own publication. We are actually very, very proud of this. This is a purely student-run and organized publication. So all the articles are contributed by our students. And the designing, the layout, and the photographs, basically all about this magazine is being done by the student. And we actually receive very positive feedback from our faculty member, from our fellow majors on our magazine. So even though the welfare pack giveaway and the magazine kind of mark the end of the semester, but the activities of the History Society don't end with the end of the semester. So during the holiday, we also have activities going on. History Society and our fellow majors just came back from Bintan last week. We went for a trip with our classmates. So this photo was taken after we did all those water activities like snorkeling, banana boat, and flying fish. So if you have been to the beach and the resort, you probably know what I'm talking about. So who says as historians, we only hide in archive and read books? We also go out and have fun as well. And during June, from June to August, this is a time we actually reach out to the public and also have our flagship event, which is History Festival. So History Festival is a collaboration from between NUS History Society and the National Museum of Singapore. So on the left, we have the video making competition that is actually targeting at secondary school and junior colleges students. So we hope that through video making, they can explore the history of a particular region or a particular period of time based on their own observation and research. So after the competition, we also have various seminars lined out for the general public as well as the students to encourage more interest in history. And last but not least, we have our history orientation camp. Last year was actually the first year that we had our first orientation camp. The idea of having this camp is to actually get potential history majors or history freshmen to come and get to know each other, to know their peers and also to know the seniors. So this picture was taken after they played the water game last year. This year, we are also having our orientation camp as well. And probably you can guess from this poster, our theme this year is on movies in history, history in movies. So we are looking at how movie as a media is very important in history, and we'll also be catching out some of very interesting movies as well. So it's taken place in mid-July. So if you are interested, please feel free to approach me. You can sign up with me or know more about the camp. So that's basically more or less about my presentation. And if you have any questions, you can actually look for this website. This is our own website to answer your question, or you can look for me. And if you don't actually have to take down the website, you can just Google it and you can find it immediately. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ling. Now, you notice that in all these fun activities, when the students are really having fun, there are no lectures around. That's not to say that students never have fun with the lectures, okay? We are considered, I think, quite a student-friendly department. So the students do have fun with their lectures, but they probably still have more fun without it, I'd have to be honest. Okay, any questions on what we have covered? About major job prospects, anything? Well, we will end here, and both Ling and I will be around for a few minutes. So I don't think the next session is starting for a little while. So you are welcome to stay around and ask us any questions if anybody feels paise to do it in the group, okay? But thanks very much for coming.